Yo, what's going on, guys? My name is Ivan Albrook. Today, I don't have a Pokemon gameplay video for you today. We're going to be talking about a interesting topic that has come up within the trading card game community as a whole. What game is more difficult between Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh? So, just a quick introduction for those who haven't watched. My name is Ivan. I've been playing TCGs for a long time, and I've played both Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon. I have experienced the ups and downs of both games, and while I have more experience in one than the other, I can truly say that one stands to be slightly more difficult than the other. But I do have a strong opinion on both. So I'm just going to go through and we're going to talk about it. And, I'm going to give my full personal opinion on this. This is not the correct opinion. It is not the incorrect opinion. This is just my opinion. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion on the matter. This is just based off of personal experience. So let's go through it. Before we do, though, click like and subscribe. It'd be awesome if you did. And leave a comment on what you truly believe to be the more difficult TCG to play. So let's get right into it. So how this all came about is there were some people on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, speaking on the topic of Pokemon being a very easy card game. And on the surface, it really is. It is very user-friendly, beginner-friendly. However, there's some points about Pokemon that I'd like to make as we go through. But as you can see, here's a screenshot of Pokeduel's TikTok. Or not TikTok. Pokeduel's TikTok's tweet. Sorry. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not even that hard. It's one of the easiest card games at high levels of play. Try hard to play the game. Make spreadsheets of 1 to 3 card combos. I feel like if people did this with Pokemon, there would be too many variables. He does have a point with the combos when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh! We'll get into that. But saying Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't even that hard is something that I disagree with. And I am mainly a Pokemon player. I haven't played Yu-Gi-Oh! In a long time. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Is tricky. And that's all I'll say so far. But this sparked a lot of discussion between Yu-Gi-Oh! Players and Pokemon players alike. And most of the community believes Pokemon is harder or Yu-Gi-Oh! Is harder. There's opinions, of all kinds about the matter. So this sparked a really good topic that I'd like to talk about personally because I've experienced in both games. I have more experience in one than the other. As you can tell, it's Pokemon, but I do have some experience in Yu-Gi-Oh! Let's just go through it here. So here's my history with both TCGs. So I started collecting both at a young age, as did everyone else. I got into Pokemon when I was really young, same with Yu-Gi-Oh! I collected both as much as the other. I loved both. I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Like the actual game with the actual rules from 2012 to 2016. So, in terms of sets, I started with Abyss Rising. That was the first box I got, and I ended with Breakers of Shadow. I didn't attend any regionals just because I was a little too young and I didn't have a lot of time to go to a ton of tournaments, and I didn't have a lot of resources. Like, I didn't, drive at the time or anything like that. So I was young, or younger I should say, when I played Yu-Gi-Oh! I quit because of the pendulum mechanic, and I didn't really enjoy the game at that point. I mainly played online on I think it was DevPro. I can't remember the name of the site, but I think it was DevPro, and I quit because of the pendulum mechanic. I wasn't really enjoying how combo heavy and you just never had a chance to respond if you had no cards, or if the cards you had would just get instantly countered. And that's kind of what Yu-Gi-Oh has turned into, as far as I'm concerned. It's been more, it's more player interactive now. However, it's so combo heavy that games don't really last that long, and it's, you don't really enjoy it as much. As I was kind of getting out of Yu-Gi-Oh, I was starting to get into Pokemon. So how I learned to play the TCG, or why I learned, I got Omega Ruby for my 3DS as a Christmas present, and I played it and I loved it. And I'm thinking, I wonder what the cards are like. And they had Mega Evolutions at the time, which is a really cool mechanic. And I started to get interested. I started playing on PTCG Online, and the rest was history. So I played that for a couple of years. I quit in 2017 because I was just swamped with college and I just had no time to play. So in terms of sets, I started with Primal Clash, which is basically the Oras set, and I quit around Crimson Invasion. I didn't really enjoy the game as much, and also college was hectic, so I didn't really have a lot of time. And then years passed, COVID happened, everyone is talking about Pokemon, it's booming, so I decided to reinstall Pokemon Trading Card Game Online, and I started playing the game again. Excuse me. The VMAX mechanic was in the game, which I thought was interesting. The tag team mechanic was still in the game. Whether people see that as a good or bad thing, it was a mechanic. And I have a lot more experience with Pokemon because I've been playing it since Evolving Skies. I've attended 3 regionals in my time. I started playing more competitively about just under 2 years. I'd say a year and a half now. Actually playing in real life tournaments and stuff. I've attended 3 regionals. I've won a couple league cups and challenges and all that crap. So I have more experience with Pokemon because I actually enjoy the game. It was easier for me to pick up again. And that's something I'm going to point out later on. So that's my history with it all. Let's just get into the nitty gritty here. So here are the topics that we're going to talk about. So like I said, I have experience playing both games for multiple years. Like I said, I've enjoyed Pokemon more, so I've played it for longer. However, I have gone through the XYZ era into the Pendulum era of Yu-Gi-Oh, which is where the game truly changed, in my opinion, for the worst. I think the game got a lot worse. And then once I heard about what Lynx did, I was like, okay, I will never touch Yu-Gi-Oh again. There's no way. So I played both games for multiple years. But here's the thing. These 2 games are very different in the fact that Yu-Gi-Oh has side decking. And I don't know if Magic has side decking or Lorcana. I'm not really sure. But Pokemon does not have side decking. There are prize cards, which is an in-game mechanic where you have 6 random cards set aside, and every time you knock out one of your opponent's Pokemon, you take a prize card, and that is your game mechanic to win. That is your general game mechanic. Side decking is strategic and matchup dependent. So you don't get that type of adaptability in that sense with Pokemon. You have a limited 60 card deck that you have to use for the entire tournament. Pokemon is a lot easier to learn. And we're going to get into this topic a little more, but on the surface, Pokemon is a lot easier to learn, and we're going to get into that later, as I said. Player interactions. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is more interactive. Ban lists, rotations in limited formats, combos, adaptability, prize pools, popularity, and costs. These are all big topics. And we're gonna get into this, and we're gonna go into each card game on its own, and I'm going to highlight each point. So here's Pokemon. Like I said, you're limited to the same 60 cards throughout a tournament. You cannot make a single change or anything like that. They used to have that, but it was a little too difficult, too many deck list errors and all that. And they cut that mechanic, and Pokemon has only been standard legal for the last 3-4 years. It used to be expanded, but now it's standard legal. Prize cards add randomness and variance to the game. So, like I said, you are limited to the 60 cards. The 6 cards that are put into your prize cards are completely random. You have no idea because they are face down. So this adds some randomness and variance, which means you have to adapt on the fly each game. So the more practice you have with your deck, the more you're going to be able to figure out your lines into certain things when certain things are prized. And that's a big thing. There's a yearly rotation, and there are like no banned cards. There are no banned cards in the standard format, and there hasn't been in a long, long time. So Pokemon rotates around April every year. Usually the 4 oldest sets in each block are rotated, and it's really important because the meta shifts in a way where you're like, okay, this card just got introduced, it's sticking around for at least 2 years. That's just how it works. Pokemon has simpler rules. It's more user-friendly, more beginner-friendly, as I noted. On the surface, it's a very basic understanding game. There are some rules that skewer some people, but it is nowhere nearly as difficult to understand as you. There's less player interactions, limited options, and what I mean by that is it's a turn-by-turn basis. You cannot activate your trap card in Pokemon. There's nothing like that. There's no hand traps. There's no quick play spells. There's nothing like that. It is all limited to your own turn. So that is something that's important, and that's something that, opens a little bit more skill in some ways, in my opinion. And yeah, so there's less interactiveness compared to Yu-Gi-Oh! There's new mechanics added every few years. So this new mechanic coming out, or that has come out recently, is the Terra mechanic, which means you're basically, if it's a Terra Pokemon that's on your bench, it cannot be damaged by attacks. And that's not the effect of the Pokemon. That is the, what do you call it? That is kind of like, I can't remember the name of what I was trying to say, or the word I was trying to say. But it's an everlasting effect that is not affected by, stuff that stops abilities or anything like that. And that's pretty interesting. And, we just got out of the VMAX format, which is, evolving into a 3-prize Pokemon, and also the tag teams, which were basic 3-prize Pokemon that were, just ruined the power creep of Pokemon, in my opinion. But it's getting better now. They're realizing it, and the power creep is going way down. Combos are harder to pull off and easier to memorize. So here's the thing. Yu-Gi-Oh! It takes 2 to 3 cards to win a game. Pokemon, it takes a multitude of turns to even set up a combo. And that's something that I like. And small card combos like, Ultra Ball for Charizard, or Pidgeot to search out rare candy to evolve into Charizard. Those are little tiny combos that every Pokemon player understands pretty much. The cost of a meta deck is usually $100 or less, and this is so important. Pokemon is a very cheap game to get into compared to Yu-Gi-Oh! We'll get into that. Pokemon averages around 2,000-ish players each regional, and that's mainly in North America. In Europe, it's a little bit smaller, and in Asia, they have even bigger tournaments. We're talking 3,000, 4,000 people. Pokemon offers cash prizes, scholarships, and exclusive rewards, such as the #1 trainer card, or the Pikachu trophy, or a plethora of different things. You get swag bags, you get rewarded for attending tournaments, and that's something that I like personally about Pokemon. So it might seem so far that I'm a little biased towards Pokemon because I play it, but let me tell you, I have an equally fair opinion on both games, and we'll go through that after we get through the Yu-Gi-Oh section. Yu-Gi-Oh is unique because it has a side deck and an extra deck to customize your deck in a best of 3 set. So let's say it's matchup dependent and you have some cards to counter another deck. That's great. You can swap in 3 cards that counter your opponent's deck with 3 cards that don't. That's something that is cool about Yu-Gi-Oh. You can, adapt between games with Yu-Gi-Oh and give yourself an advantage going into the next one. There's a ban list, but it has a wider card pool from the first set, Legends of Blue Eyes, to the current set, which is whatever that is. I don't really know. Ban lists happen, I'm pretty sure, every 3-4 months, if I'm not correct. I didn't really do research on it, but I'm just going based off of memory. There were ban lists every 3 to 5 months when I quit Yu-Gi-Oh. The game is more difficult. It's not entry level friendly as Pokemon is. It's a very combo heavy meta, but less randomness. And randomness is compared to Pokemon's randomness, where you have your prize cards and an important card could be prized or whatnot. You know what cards are in your deck for Yu-Gi-Oh, and they are not taken away or limited at all. You know what cards are in your deck at all times. The game is dependent on player interaction and counterability. So there's lots of hand traps, there's lots of quick play spells, there's some traps. I don't even know if traps are played anymore, honestly. Back when I played, traps were kind of countered by overpowered pendulum pendulum cards. So for example, if I was playing like Satellar Knights, that's the main deck I played back in the day, I'd go against like Performapal and they just shit on me, kind of thing. Yeah, there's more player to player interaction. Your opponent has a chance to stop you midway through your turn, which is something that's interesting about Yu-Gi-Oh. It has a little more confusing mechanics, chain links, order of operations, and stuff like that. You have to know what you're doing when it comes to combos. But once you memorize the combo for Yu-Gi-Oh, it's super easy. The meta deck cost is significantly higher, ranging between $400 to $600, sometimes more. I did research on this one because I was curious. My Satellar Knight deck back in the day cost around $200. And as a teenager, that was a lot of money. I saved up for a while to get that deck built. YCS and regionals average around 1,500 to 2,000 people. That's mainly on the western side of the world. On the eastern side of the world in Europe, it can be a little more. Just depends on the location. Yu-Gi-Oh does not offer cash prizes. They offer game systems and kitchen appliances. That says a lot about the company that runs the game. Not saying it's bad, but if they offered cash prizes, it'd probably give people more incentive to playing the game. Here are the key components. Pokemon, far more popular overall than Yu-Gi-Oh is. That is a known fact. Yu-Gi-Oh is probably better than Pokemon when it comes to player interaction. Everything you do is based on what your opponent does. Pokemon, you have a little more leeway and you can kind of force your opponent into a situation where they don't have a lot of choice to do such things. Yu-Gi-Oh, like I said, they could play a card and it pretty much just stops you in your tracks. Pokemon has, an overall better user friendliness and beginner friendliness, as I've said a few times throughout this video, which I think is a really good component into growing the player base of a game. Yu-Gi-Oh is probably better than Pokemon for combo orientation. That is just mainly how people win their games now. They're taking 3-4 minute long turns doing combos and stuff like that to put themselves in a spot where they can control the game. Pokemon has a much better cost to play and a much more rewarding prize pool. this is just a known fact. The winner of the World Championships gets 50 grand. And if you're a senior player or a junior player, you get offered a scholarship, which is very, very useful for the parenting side and, just for the future of that person. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is probably better for the card pool, ban list, and limitability. The ban list changes a lot. Cards become limited and semi-limited, which I think is pretty cool. Yu-Gi-Oh! Also limits to maximum 3 copies of a card in a deck, unless said otherwise on the ban list. Pokemon, it's 4, because Pokemon you play with a larger deck. So, Yu-Gi-Oh! I think just has a little more leeway because they have a wide range of cards dating back from the first set to ever come out to the newest set, which is, that's 23 years of cards. Just saying. And Pokemon over Yu-Gi-Oh! In adaptability. I think the prize card mechanic makes Pokemon pretty unique compared to Yu-Gi-Oh! There isn't really another card game that does it like Pokemon does when it comes to that. Prize cards are representative of what your opponent is able to do, and what you're able to do. So, the amount of prize cards that you have left and your opponent has left is very significant in the conclusion of the game. So you have to learn to adapt on the fly if some cards are prized. Like I said, this is like a pretty big point, in my opinion, being able to adapt on the fly. Yu-Gi-Oh! It's kind of like, okay, if you stop my combo, it's like, okay, go ahead, you do your combo and you probably beat me. I don't know. This is a very it's a tricky topic to speak about as someone who's played both games. Because I liked, there's a point in time where I thought Yu-Gi-Oh! Was really fun. There's a time where I thought Pokemon sucked. You know what I mean? Like, I have a love-hate relationship with both games. So I wanted to make it fair by giving, each game a few positive components. And before we get to my conclusion, like I said, this is all based off of my opinion. If you have any facts or your own opinion, please tell me down below. Correct me if I'm wrong about certain components or statistics or anything like that. We're going to get to the conclusion. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a harder game overall. Plain and simple. There's more mechanics. It's an ever-changing ban list. It changes a lot. Not saying that, it's, more susceptible to having to be adaptive, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Has always had this notion that, don't get too comfortable. The game's going to change in a couple months. Pokemon, the game can kind of stay the same for a little longer than that, maybe 4 or 5 months compared to Yu-Gi-Oh! Pokemon is an easier game to get into, but, and this is a big point, it's harder to master, in my opinion. Sequencing, memory of prize cards, and pace of play. Pokemon, you are doing a best of 3 for 50 minutes. Now, Yu-Gi-Oh!, I'm not too sure what it is. I'm pretty sure it's like best of 3, 40 minutes. Sometimes they don't even last that long. So, Pokemon is a lot harder to master only because, like I said, adapting on the fly is a big thing in Pokemon. You have to kind of change your strategy midway through if a card is taken away from you, like, it's knocked out, or, if it's prized, or if your opponent, messes with your resources in any way. Both games are not easy to be good at. I think the skill ceiling of Pokemon, I think is a little higher than Yu-Gi-Oh! Not by much, but I think it's a little bit harder in the sense that being a top player in Pokemon is not as easy, or not as hard. Being a top player in Pokemon is harder than being a top player in Yu-Gi-Oh. That's what I want to say. Sorry. But not by much. It's very close, I'd say. Both games have a unique trait, Yu-Gi-Oh being more player interactive while also being difficult, and Pokemon being more rewarding to be skillful at, but easier to understand on the surface. So, Pokemon is like this. This is the entry level, and this is like the pro level. And then there's me. You know what I mean? I'm not like anywhere near a pro, but I'd say I'm probably a little better than the average player. A little bit. That's just not me tooting my horn, but just based off of my local results and tournament results, better than the average player in my area at least. And finally, can we just stop with these wars? This video was not meant to trigger a war or a heated discussion. It's meant to give perspective from someone who's played both games. I just want everyone to enjoy their own card game. There's no reason to call Yu-Gi-Oh a shit game or Pokemon a shit game. You can think that, but there's no point in calling it that because you're just going to get people mad. And the world sucks when people are mad at you. That's just my opinion. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. My overall conclusion is, Yu-Gi-Oh is a little bit harder as a game overall, but Pokemon is harder to be a master at, I'd say. That's my main conclusion. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you disagree or agree with my opinions or the formatting of this video or anything, let me know down below. Drop a like, drop a sub if you enjoyed it, and yeah, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your night. Peace out.